Welcome back to lesson 12 where we are talking about while and do while loops. So we just finished talking about while and now we're going to talk about do while. And it's called a do while loop because you use the word do and then you do stuff and then you have a while at the end. So it's pretty apt to be named if you ask me. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to put do while loop. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to sum all the numbers from 3 to 79. So we're going to start with a do, and then we're going to have open and close brackets, and I just love Eclipse for doing that for me. So you have your brackets, and then you have while. Okay, now this is a little different because a semicolon goes after this while, but not after the while and the while loop. So just like the while loop, we're going to initialize outside of the loop. So since we've already used sum in this program, let's do int total. We're going to set that equal to 0. And we've already used j, so we'll do I equals 3. I'm going to make a comment here that this is my initializing expression. So in this while loop up here, in line 14, I'm just going to make a comment. There's no semicolon. Because there's not a semicolon for a while loop, in a do while loop, there is one after the while. So make sure you put a note there so that you can remember that in the future. And as you probably guessed, what goes in that parentheses is your control expression. So again, we're summing all the numbers from 3 to 79. So we can say while I is less than or equal to 79, or you can just say I is less than 80 since we're dealing with int. Whatever floats your boat. And inside our code, just like before, we're going to take our total, so we called it total in this program, equals total plus I, because I is what we're increasing. And the last thing we need is our step expression. So I plus plus, and I'm going to copy and paste this exact same note from up here because our step expression goes inside the loop. So then after our loop runs, let's come on down and we're going to print, not J, we're going to print total. See what our number comes out to. So head run. Right, it prints 80 from before with our J, and it prints 3,157, which is what 3 plus 4 plus 5 all the way up to 79 would be. So our loop does work. Right. Okay, so that is our while loop and our do while loop. So you can see little nuances of difference. The major difference between the while loop and the do while loop is that in the while loop, the control expression is at the top, and in do while, the control expression is at the bottom. And there is a purpose for that. But if I were you, my big question would be why? Why did we just learn two different loops that basically do the same thing? Well, there is a fine nuance of difference between while loops and do while loops. Now, the differences between the two are a semicolon and the location of the control expression. And that does have an effect on how the program actually runs. The while loop can be skipped because of the control expression location. So like if we're in our program and J is 80, our entire loop is skipped and nothing inside of our loop will run. It'll just skip straight to the bottom and nothing will happen within the loop. Now in a do while loop with the control expression at the bottom, the whole thing has to be executed at least once. So your initializing expression comes at the top, you have do, you have your code, your step expression, while's at the bottom, there is a semicolon there. But in your code, everything within do runs at least once. So even if I is 80, everything inside the do will happen, hits while, it doesn't go back and restart. So that's the major difference between the two, is that while will only execute if your Boolean test here is true, whereas the do while loop, everything in do will run, then it will hit while and determine if it keeps going back or not. So the last thing that I want to talk about with do while and while loops is escape sequences. So we've already talked a little bit about escape sequences like printing a new line or printing a tab and things like that. So one of the things that we can do within a loop is we can set breaks within a loop. So come up to your while loop and we're going to create a nested loop. So we're going to put a statement in here. And we're going to say if j is equal to 65. Remember, all of these control expressions are Booleans, because if the control statement's true, it keeps running the loop. If it's false, it doesn't. So come into your if statement that you just created, put some brackets. And if j is 65, we're going to increase j, and then we're going to break. So remember, we used breaks when we did switches to exit the switch. So what break is going to do is when j is 65, it's going to increase it to 66, break, and exit us straight from the loop. So if we print and we print j, it should be 66, and it is. So let's see what the sum is too, because that was the variable we used for this one. We run it, it's 2077, so it's adding all the numbers between 3 and 65. So if you have a break, the loop terminates and does not restart. So the other escape I'm going to teach you, besides break, is called continue. So now if we run continue and we look at the sum, it's 3092, which is 65 away from 3157. So what continue does is it escapes all the rest of the code of the loop, but then restarts the loop. So continue skips the rest of the loop, then starts the loop over. Break exits the loop entirely and ends your code. So whatever's after your loop will still execute, but whatever was left in that loop doesn't happen anymore. With continue, it will. And I do want to point out these brackets to you. So like within the do loop and within the while loop, if we didn't have brackets, it would, just like the if and just like the for, that first line will run and everything else is considered outside the loop. So keep that in mind when you see that in the future. For lesson 12, there's no project, but you do have a set of questions. So let me know if you run into any problems.